just as an artist has his canvas where he creates his masterpiece and a set of tools that he uses to create them with. Similarly, in Photoshop, we have our canvas, and to create work in it, we need the tools. Without tools, Photoshop cannot exist, and it's one of the core ingredients which separates Photoshop from all of those slider-based photo editing applications that anybody can use without any training. We have already talked in brief about what tools are, and we have also talked about 4 of the most important tools in Photoshop in lesson 1. If you haven't checked it, please do check it out. In this lesson, we are going to go all in into all the details of the tools, what tools are, how are they grouped, how to customize them, how to modify them, and some cool, awesome shortcuts. We have some fantastic examples lined up for you. So without any further ado, let's get started. Let's start with the concept of tools and options bar. What is the link between them? You see, whatever tool you have selected, its properties, features, settings, everything, it's gonna show up at the top in the options bar. For instance, if we have the text tool selected, all of the properties of the text tool is going to show up right there at the top. The font, the size, and if you want some additional settings, you can also access it from right here. You can click on this button and character and paragraph tab will open as well. So whatever tool you have selected, its properties are going to show up at the top at the options bar. Alright, so let's say you have the brush tool selected. Its properties are going to show up top. Now that you know the concepts, without watching the next few lessons, I want you to experiment. Now you know that the properties of every tool are going to show up at the top. Play with it, experiment with it, and just by experimenting, you will learn even more than watching these tutorials. So let's start with our first example and do some experiments with this image and add some nice colors. So first of all, we're going to choose the gradient tool. Again, the properties of the gradient are going to show up top. So let's say you want to brighten up the face area, because anything that is bright, our attention goes towards it. So we want to draw the attention of the viewer towards the face and away from the background areas. So let's add a curves adjustment layer. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. Now we're going to be talking about curves in detail later, but for now you can just brighten it by creating a point. Let's say you want to brighten the highlights, so create a point in the highlights. Right hand side are the highlights, left hand side are the shadows. So create a point right there and simply take it up, something like this. We don't want to blow out the details, just focus on the face, nowhere else. If we take it too much, it gets too bright and we begin to lose details. We don't want that. Also, we want some warmth in it. So let's go to blue. Now the opposite of blue is yellow. Remember, RGB opposite of CMY. So opposite of blue is yellow. So let's decrease the blues in the highlights to bring up yellows. This is okay. So let's do it a little bit here as well. So blue is fine, but it's making it too greenish. So let's go to the green channel and reduce greens as well, so that it takes away the green. In a similar manner, I like this color. Let's zoom out, and by the way, to fit the canvas to the screen, press Ctrl or Command 0. Alright, now it's fit. Select the mask, and that's when we're going to use the gradient. Now we have the gradient. Make sure the gradient is white to black, and sometimes you might need it from black to white. And a great trick to achieve this is by setting the gradient to the first one, which is foreground to background. So if you double click on it, and if you select the first one, the name here is foreground to background. So whatever color you have in the foreground, it will start with that color, and whatever color you have in the background, it will end with that color. So let's say we inverse the foreground and the background colors by pressing this button or pressing X. See, it changes right up there as well. Now there are different kinds of gradients. Again, to get the properties of any tool, we look up right there. Right, different kinds of gradients. The first one is the simple linear gradient. So if you click on that, it is just a simple gradient, just like this, right? The next one is a radial gradient. See, it comes in like a circle. If you cannot see the mask, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask to see it. This is the radial gradient. Now there is this funky different types of gradients that you can play and experiment with. This is a nice gradient which is useful from time to time in creating fog. Alright, so the one that we're going to be using is the radial gradient, because we want to just brighten up the face area with that gradient. So hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask to bring the image back again, and let's drag in a gradient from the face, just like this. How do you feel about that? Looks interesting? Let's do a smaller gradient. That was kind of too big. This one is okay. Here's the before, here's the after. Just brightens up the face beautifully. I love that. You can add a smaller one, you can add a bigger one, that's absolutely up to you. Now, let's darken up the background areas. So create one more curves adjustment layer and then create a point in the shadows and just simply take it down. Don't take it too much down that you begin to lose details in the shadows. So this much is fine. Maybe if you want to just retain the highlights, you can just create a point right here, bring it back, but that's totally up to you. Now, let's bring the image to as it was by pressing Ctrl or Command 0. Now select the mask. Now we want black to white because we want the opposite. If we go white to black, it will darken where I drag it from. We want just the opposite. How do we get that? Simply invert these colors, invert the foreground and the background by pressing X. All right. Now you can drag it from the face just like this. So I think we need to drag a little longer. There we go. Here's the before, here's the after. Looks fantastic. So we wanted a little more. Okay, this looks good. Let's take a look. Here's the before, here's the after. More attention towards the face. How easy it was. Now you can group both of these curves by selecting the first one, hold the Ctrl or Command, select the second one. Both of them are now selected. Press Ctrl or Command G to group them. G for group, right? So here's the before. Here is the after. Makes a hell lot of difference, doesn't it? Now, if you want to enhance the colors even more, you can always add color lookup tables. So let's click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose color lookups. You can choose whatever is your favorite. Just scroll through them, choose what you like. There are lots of interesting ones. So the first one that I'm going to choose right here is fall colors. Perfectly fits these kind of images. So here's the before, here's the after. See, the colors are getting so much better. We don't want so much of an opacity, so let's set the opacity to about 75%. But as you can see, the skin has got a lot of green in it. It has got some green color cast that we need to remove. And there are lots of ways to removing it, but I'm just going to simply add another color lookup table. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose color lookup again. And this time we will choose something like soft warming. See how much beautiful and softer it makes it. So here's the before, here's the after. It takes away the green. Now, if you don't want it in rest of the areas and only the skin, you can do that too. So select the mask, press Ctrl or Command I to invert the mask. Take the brush again. We are learning about tools. So all the properties of the tool, of that tool, is at the top. We don't want any smoothing to the brush. Opacity and flow at 100. We want a soft round brush and we want to paint with white. So set the foreground color to white and just paint over the skin. There you go. Look how much nicer it makes the skin. All right. See, all that green, it's simply taking that away. Now you might be thinking this is of course too much. So let's decrease the opacity to 70 or 75. So let's set it to 70. And it looks pretty good. Also, let's say you only wanted to affect the colors and not the contrast. So in that case, you can change the blend mode from normal to color. That way it won't affect the contrast. And because of that, you can experiment even more with opacity. But anyway, I liked 70%. Let's zoom out. Let's take a look at the before and after. Here's the before. Here's the after. Massive difference. Now, if you think the brights are too bright, you can add one more curves at the very top. Just decrease the highlights just a touch and probably a little more and bring back the shadows just like that. And maybe take it even down. So here's the before, here's the after. Just softens things a little bit. Before, after. There you go. Just by using tools and its properties at the top, we were able to create some wonderful masks to bring the best out from this image. So just a quick reminder, what is the concept of tools and the options bar? Whatever tool you have selected, its properties are going to show up top. right? Now let's move on to the second example where we will learn how tools are grouped. In Photoshop by default, similar tools with similar functions are grouped together. Now of course you can change how they are grouped, you can customize them all, and we will talk about that later, but for now just know that by default, similar tools with similar functions are grouped together. And how do you know that certain tools are in a group? If you take a look at the tools right here, and by the way, there are tools in 2 rows. You can change it to 1 row by simply clicking on this arrow, if that's what you prefer. But I always prefer 2 row because I like them big. Alright, now if you look at the tool, on the right bottom corner, there is an arrow, which means that there are other tools in the group. If there is no arrow, that means it is just one tool right there. There's nothing inside a group. If there is a group, there will be an arrow. Alright, so for example, let's take a look at this, the sharpen tool. If you click and hold, you will see other tools right there. Sharpen tool, the opposite of that, the blur tool, and there is the smudge tool, right? They all form a group. Let's take a look at the automatic selection tools. If you hold, you will see the object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand tool. The quick selection tool automatically tries to detect the edges once you try to make a selection. So let's say you want to make a selection of just this coffee. You just play over it, it just finds that edge right there automatically. Let's say you want just the cup. So you would just get a little outside, include the cup right there, and it detects that edge. You also want the handle, so you paint over it, it got the handle as well, right? Now there is the object selection tool. The object selection tool is available in the later versions of Photoshop, Photoshop 2020 and above. Now in the object selection tool, all you have to do is to make a rough selection around the object that you want to select, and Photoshop automatically determines the object that you are trying to select. So for instance, I want to select the whole thing right there. So I will just make a rough selection around it, and boom, it got it. You can also use rectangle right here. Press Ctrl or Command D to deselect that. Have a look at the top. What do we have? The options, the settings of the tool. So let's choose rectangle instead of lasso, and you can also simply say, alright, I want to select this object right there, and it automatically made a selection. Now it did leave out these areas, and we can easily add that. We can go to lasso, hold the shift, it turns into add mode, and then I want to say to Photoshop, alright, add these two, and it's gonna add that as well. It left out these areas, no problem. We're gonna say add these two, it added that. Similarly right here as well, press Ctrl or Command D to deselect that. So let's do a fun project with this, because why not? We have opened a fun image. Let's select this teacup and let's create a logo or a branding for coffee. Alright, so let's make a selection of this cup. It should do a pretty good job. See, it left out that handle, no problem. We can hold the shift key and then say to Photoshop, alright, this is a part as well. See, it considered that too. You can also combine it with the quick selection tool. So if we choose the quick selection tool and if we add it, it's going to consider that as well. So let's add that right there. There you go. Interesting. Now let's click on the mask button to just have that. It didn't do a pretty good job right here, so we will try again instead. This is a simple circle. Let's do it manually. Press Ctrl or Command D to deselect that. Now we will select the ellipse marquee tool. If you have a look right here as well, similar tools are grouped together. There's rectangular marquee tool, elliptical marquee tool, elliptical. Select that and let's make a circle. If you hold the shift key, it will maintain the proportions, and then if you hold the space bar, you can move that circle. So move the circle around so that it selects the cup. Now the cup is not a perfect circle, we need to keep that in mind. Alright, that seems to be okay. It covers most of it. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, that's fine. And by the way, you can always transform a selection by right-clicking on it and then choosing Transform Selection. That will only transform the selection. Hold the shift key and just extend it to the left hand side. If you want to extend it right there at the top, you can do that too. And hold the shift key, extend it right there at the bottom. It got most of it. hit enter. Now we need to add that handle. We can combine it with the quick selection tool. So let's add that handle as well. It did that perfectly. This time it looks okay. This time it looks perfect. All right. We can always go to the lasso tool, hold the shift key and add that little bit of the area that it left out. And there you go. We have a pretty nice, good selection. Let's click on the mask button right in there. Okay, now we have a perfect mask. It left out certain areas right here, no problem at all. You will just simply select that area just like this. Select the mask and fill it with white, because white shows up in black, hides. So with white as the foreground color, to fill, hold the Alt key and press backspace. So Alt backspace is the shortcut for filling it. On a Mac, that would be Option Delete. Fill it, and there you have the handle joined right there. Now let's select the layer and let's move it right there, and we're gonna write something exciting. And now let's create a background, funky background. Click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose solid color. You're gonna create a solid background, right? So create a bright yellow background, maybe a little more towards the red. Let's take it down. There you have the coffee, there you have the yellow background, and let's add a shadow. Now there are lots of ways of adding drop shadows and some complex shadows, but for right now, we will just create a layer in between the coffee cup, and there's a layer in between, and then we have the yellow background. Just take a brush, take a soft round brush, make it a little larger with black as the foreground color. We're gonna just dab right there. There we go. We have a pretty nice shadow. So we'll just decrease the opacity. I think it's too much. So we can have it at about 75. And then we can write something fun. So below the shadow, let's add some text. So click to add a text. First of all, we're gonna write C. I like the font Gilroy Light. That's fine. Select the C and I clicked on that box at the top. Again, all of the properties of the text will be at the top in the options bar. All right, let's choose the color white for it. Hit OK. Now let's select the move tool, press Ctrl or Command T, and let's make the C a little larger. This looks all right. And now let's write rest of the letters. So we will just go back to the text tool, click, and let's add the rest. So there's COFFEE. All right. Now we're going to choose the font. We selected the text. I'm going to choose the font Babus Bold. All right. Now let's make it bigger and place it right there. A little smaller. This is an interesting project, isn't it? If you want to make it a little more exciting, you can make it a little more bigger and take it under the cup just a little bit. And I think the yellow color is too saturated. So double click on the logo of the adjustment layer and you can just desaturate it just a little bit. And there you go. This looks even more exciting. Now sometimes your toolbar might look a little different. There might be some tools that are missing or misplaced, or just some things are just not at the right place. Or maybe everything is right, but most of the tools are the tools that you do not use and you only want to keep the tools that you do use. So is there a way to customize it? Of course, and that's what this section is all about. So let's learn how to customize the toolbar. So all you have to do is to click on the three dots right there and click on Edit Toolbar. So this is your toolbar right now. And this is how they are grouped. So the Move tool and the Artboard tool are grouped together. If you want to group something else to it, let's say you also wanted to group the Magic Wand tool to it for some reason. I don't know why you would do that, but let's say you wanted to do it, you will just drag it and drop it right there. Now all of those three are now grouped. So let's say you also wanted to group the Rectangular Marquee tool and the Elliptical Marquee tool to the Lasso tool group. You can just bring it right there, just like this. And these are the tools we mostly never use, the Single Row Marquee tool. So you can move it to extra tools. So if you move it there, those tools will just go away. All right. So that way you can only have the tools that you use. Also, this is something that I used to do before, is that let's say I only use a very few tools. Then you don't need these groups. You can always just keep them separate so you can quickly select those tools and make your workflow much faster. So let's say I only use the Move tool, right? and I'm gonna move everything else right there. I only use the lasso tool, elliptical tool, and the rectangular marquee tool. Maybe polygonal lasso tool from time to time. Magnetic, I don't use. So we can keep them separate. So I have separated it. I've separated this one as well, separated this one as well. All right. The object selection tool and the quick selection tool are something that I use all the time. And slice tool, slice select tool, never use them. Perspective crop is useful sometimes, and crop tool, let them be in one group, right? They need to be in one group. Frame tool, I never use in my workflow. If you're a designer, you might use it from time to time, right? So we are keeping all the tools that we don't use on the right hand side, and those tools go away. And we are taking everything outside the group so we can easily select them. We don't have to go inside the group and select each tool one by one. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm keeping everything to default. So let's say you messed it all up. You moved it here and there and just everything is messed up. So how do you reset everything? All you have to do is to click on Restore Defaults. There you go. You have the defaults right there. All right. Now remember, you have the three dots that lets you edit the toolbar. So you can choose to not show it by clicking on it. It won't show up right there. And then if you don't want to see the foreground and the background color, you can choose to not see it. If you don't use this, which is the quick mask mode, you can just turn it off, turn these off. You can always turn off whatever you don't find using at all. But if you ever want to set it to defaults, you know what to do. Restore defaults. There you go. Now, if you want to arrange your tools from the very beginning in your way, there's also one more button right here for you. You can simply click on Clear Tools. It'll take away all the tools, and then you can start from right here. Let's say you need the move tool, then you need the rectangular marquee tool, then you scroll down and see I use the lasso tool often. So you can add your own tools in your own order, in your own way from the very beginning. Let's restore to defaults. Let's say there's a particular way you have arranged them. Let's say I don't use these. Let's say I've separated them and I've done some changes, and you want to save it as a preset. You can do that too. You can click on Save Preset, and you can simply save this toolbar preset. So let's name this, let's name this Unmesh 1. All right, let's save it. You can also load presets. So if you have just jumbled up everything and you want to load the preset that you had saved earlier, click on Load Preset. Whatever preset you had saved, click on that and load. It'll be loaded that way. Let's restore everything to defaults and click on Done. Now let me share with you something that if you know, you will never get into trouble. And this is one of the most common problems people face. Let's say we select a tool, we do some settings here and there, and the tool just isn't working right. Something is off, right? Even if you reset the toolbar and do everything, it's not working. You want to reset the tool. Here's how to do it. So let's say you're working with the brush tool and it's acting wonky, or the clone stamp tool, it's acting wonky. Something you changed right there, maybe the opacity, the flow, something you have clicked here and there and unclicked and checked and did some funky stuff that you might not be aware of. So if you want to reset it, all you have to do, maybe even change the blend mode, all right? Crazy blend mode. All you have to do is to click on this arrow right there next to the tool, again, at the top, up top, right there. Then click on the gear and choose Reset Tool. If every tool is acting wonky, you can always reset all tools, but I don't want to do that. Simply click on Reset Tool and everything right here is reset. So that's how easy it was to customizing the toolbar in Photoshop. Now let's move on to one of the most important shortcuts when it comes to tools. Now you already know that most of the tools have a particular shortcut. So the brush tool has the shortcut B. The move tool, one of the most important shortcuts that you need to remember is V. It's very important when you need to transform anything, move anything. It's one of the most important shortcuts. All right, the pen tool has the shortcut P. The text tool has T, right? Different shortcuts. Now, by the way, let me tell you about an exciting tool, which is important when it comes to painting. And that is the Rotate View tool. If you click and hold on the hand tool group, you have the Rotate View tool. Just like you rotate the canvas, you can easily rotate your canvas and then look at the image in different directions and paint on it with your comfort. Let's say you're not comfortable painting in a particular direction, you can always rotate the canvas and then paint. We always do that when we are just sketching on a piece of paper, right? We try to rotate it all the time and work accordingly. All right, you can always reset it by clicking on reset view right there. Okay, so let's say you have the brush selected and you're painting it in a certain direction. By the way, first of all, let's separate the subject. Make a copy by pressing Ctrl or Command J, and let's name this subject, and then simply select the quick selection tool or the object selection tool, and at the top you will see select subject. Now Photoshop automatically selects the subject using its AI. Now click on the mask button to create a mask. Now between it, I'm going to create a new layer, and here we are going to just, let's say, take a brush, and let's say you are painting in a particular direction. So I'm going to choose a simple brush, hard round pressure size, simple brush, right? And let's say I'm not comfortable painting in this direction. What do? I can always go to the rotate view tool, rotate it, and get back to the brush and start painting right there. Now this is a long process because again, after painting, I have to go back to the rotate view tool, reset the angle, get back to the brush, and then resume painting. Instead of doing all that, let's delete that layer, create a new layer again. What if we are painting at the top, no problem here, but right now suddenly I want to paint in a particular direction. Here's what we can do. The shortcut for the rotate view tool is R. And there's a certain way that if you press the shortcut, you can always get back to the previous tool. And the way is this. Let's say you're working with the brush, and once you want to rotate, you release the mouse or the pen, you hold the R key for the rotate view tool. Now the rotate view tool is active. You're still holding the key. We have not released the key, right? Then you rotate it in any way you want, okay? You release the mouse or the pen, tablet, whatever you use, you release the pen or the mouse. And then when you release the R key, it takes you back to the brush tool. Isn't that fantastic, right? Once you want to reset the image, you can always hold the R key, click on reset image, make sure your mouse or pen is released. When you release the R key, it will again get you back to the brush tool. Exciting, isn't it? Now this applies to all the tools. Let's say you're working with the brush and you suddenly want to go to the gradient tool. You press G, you created a gradient like this, okay? And then you want to get back to the brush tool, you release the G key and it's gonna take you back to the brush tool, right? Now let's create something exciting. Let's delete that layer, let's create a new layer. Let me show you something fun. Again, properties of every tool at the top. Now there's this exciting symmetry. So let's choose a symmetry of mandala, and you can choose segment count of your choice. So I'm gonna go with 6. So it has 6 corners, 6 lines, all right? And whatever you make here, it's gonna reciprocate it all around. Isn't that fun? So you can choose a very interesting brush. I like this one, Kyle Ultimate Inking Thick and Thin. So let's try something funky here. It's interesting, but my hand is moving a little bit. So let's increase the smoothing to about 40%. That really makes your strokes smoother. All right, so let's zoom out and see how simple that was to create that decorative item. Right? And it's super fun to do. Just experiment with it. This is one fun heck of a thing to just experiment and have fun with. See? Now you can go ahead and create a shadow for the subject to make it look a little more realistic. So double click on the right hand side of the layer, of the subject layer, and check the drop shadow. This adds the shadow. You can move the shadow as well. If you select the drop shadow, you can move it to your liking. You can control the opacity just a little bit right there, hit OK. And then of course you can also double click on the right hand side of layer 1 where you have painted that pattern. And then if you want to take it away from the dark areas, you can hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the slider to break it apart, and just take it gradually away from the dark areas. There you go. This creates a nice, exciting background. If you want to turn the symmetry off, just click on that button, turn it off, the symmetry will go away. So I hope now you have developed a solid concept of what tools are, what is the toolbar, how to access the options and the properties and the settings of every tool, how to customize the toolbar, and how to switch between different tools very easily. All you need to remember, and I'm sorry to repeat this might be annoying for you, but I want this to stick to your mind. Every tool has its properties at the top. Number 2, if you want to move between different tools fast, remember the shortcuts. All you have to do is to hold that shortcut of the other tool, use that tool and release the shortcut, and you'll get back to the previous tool. To customize the tools, you can always use those 3 dots. Click on edit toolbar and then you can edit it in your way. You can always click on reset to defaults if something goes wrong. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this lesson helped you. See you in the next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating, keep experimenting.